In 2024, I did something that some people may say was crazy. I sold everything from inside of my home to move and live abroad full time. And in today's video, I'm going to break down how I came to that decision. First, let me share what my life looked like before I sold all the contents of my home. So I was a middle-class mom, empty nester. I was probably, I think, about 46 years old. I was a grandma to 3, empty nester mom to 4, wife to my husband and I decided to sell everything. Like, I lived in a great neighborhood. There was a great school district there, very close proximity to my grandchildren. They were about 20 minutes away. We have a great community, an amazing church. Life was good. We had finally made it. We had made it to the empty nester years, but something in me wasn't feeling right. And then I had these trigger moments, and I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, I can clearly see the events that led up to me selling everything and then living abroad, not for a vacation, but for a real lifestyle switch and just recreating what I believe my life should look like as an empty nester in midlife. So the first trigger that led to me selling everything in my home and moving abroad, I would say, is probably when I went to Honduras on my first mission trip. When I came back from that mission trip, and that was like in 2007, I think it was around 2010. And even when I came back from that mission trip, I just wanted to sell everything I owned and move and just be full-time in ministry. I had served at an orphanage, and I worked very closely with the young women, and I was a young girl who was in the foster care system in New York City. So something in my heart just kind of like opened up, and I was like, I could just move here and live this life of a missionary. But my husband was like, no, that's not what we're doing. I was really like emotional because I wasn't really prepared for what the mission field would do to my heart. And so fast forward, I continued raising my kids, because that's another thing. My husband was like, I'm not picking my kids up and moving to another country to be a full-time missionary. And so years went by. The kids began to get older, and the next trigger moment was when we went on another mission trip, but this time it was to Kenya. And by this time, our kids were in high school. We had left them home, and my mom went and stayed with them for a little bit, but they were all teenagers by that time. My second oldest was in high school, and then the others were like in middle school. And we went to Kenya for about 2 weeks, and I think it was day two. Day 2, when we were there, I was just looking around, and I was like, I had been dreaming about Kenya before I went to Kenya. And then when I got there, it was like what the people call deja vu, but really it was a revelation of things I was already seeing in my dream for some years. And so I told my husband we should move here. And at that time, he was like, I'm never moving to Kenya. He said, I might have said it, but he doesn't remember saying it. But he says, I probably could have said something along those lines. But here we are, fast forward, and we do actually live in Kenya full time. So the next trigger moment, because 2017 came and went, he was like, we're never moving. So I had to put it out of my mind. Then COVID came. And so I had been a content creator since 2007. I had launched a blog around that time. Then I had became a mom blogger, and I was making a full-time income, with my blog. And that last year, that COVID year, I'd actually made $70K from my blog. It was one of my biggest years, as a content creator. And it was also one of my most eye-opening years, because with COVID, as a mom blogger, I realized that at that point, my children had kind of aged out of the mom blogger. By that time, my son, my youngest was in his senior year of high school. So I was like, what kind of mom blogger content am I going to continue doing? I was doing some back to school college stuff that I had done with my high school daughter prior to her going to college. And then also I was doing some other projects with the 2 younger kids, but I realized it's like that time was coming to an end. So I was like, what am I going to do next? And I was getting all these projects for things like Depends and Poise pads and stuff. And I was like, I don't want to be blogging about no Poise pads and no Depends undergarments. No shade, But I was like, if this is what the future looks like of blogging, I was like, I got to find something else to do. And I asked myself, okay, what am I passionate about? So COVID, with the shutdown of all the major brands that I used to work with, like the Walmarts and the Unilever and the Costco and all of that came to a standstill. So there was no projects. But because I had done so many great partnerships the year before, those projects paid out the year of COVID. And that's why my income was $70K that year. And actually that year before COVID, that's when I got really serious about my brand. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can make 6 figures with this brand. And so I did that. Then COVID hit. And then I was just no work, no creation, no creativity, no partnerships on any brand. And I think I got a little bit depressed, and I started thinking about Kenya again. And it was around that time, as we came out of COVID, maybe we're a year or two out of COVID, my husband started saying, you know what? I'm thinking about maybe us moving to Kenya. And I said, say what now? And so I was so excited, but I didn't get too excited because I was like, I don't know. I just kind of put it out of my mind. But I was a little bit excited deep down inside. So I said, okay, that's fine. All right. Maybe we'll do it. We'll see what the Lord says. Right. And so then what happened is after COVID, cause all of my kids, except for my oldest daughter, were back home in the house. Like, the 2 youngest were already there, but my son had come home from college because the schools were closed. So after COVID, they all, my son dispersed. He went back to college. He was in New Jersey. And then my daughter, she was going to college every day, living at home. And then my son, he started college. And so I was starting to get these first tastes of being an empty nester. Like nobody was home with me all day. It was just me. My husband was still working and stuff. He would come home in the afternoon and I would say, hey, I wonder what life is going to be like when we're retired and we don't have jobs anymore. So we used to kind of like play around with the idea. But at the end of the day, I realized that I began, especially once my youngest son went to college, like when he started university and he was staying at school, and then my daughter, she moved out, the house was just empty. And I stopped looking at the neighborhood like I used to, because I realized I moved to that neighborhood for the school districts, because I knew I wanted my kids to be in a certain school district, for the community. But now that my kids were gone, I was like, is this what I really want or need? I don't need the school district anymore. And I don't know, the community, I feel like I was outgrowing it. Younger families were moving into the neighborhood, like people were selling their houses, younger families were moving in, and a lot of our neighbors had moved. So I think that was the things that triggered us selling our things. And so we had to then, as I said, my husband said, okay, we're going to move to Kenya. So when he finally made the decision, say we're going to move to Kenya, now we have to decide, okay, what are we going to do with the house? So we decided we're not going to sell the house, but then we're like, okay, are we going to just leave the house? Are we going to rent the house? Are we going to sell the house? So selling the house was out. We weren't going to do that. It didn't make financial sense, especially after us talking to our realtor friend. And we started looking at different comps and seeing what the rent could be. And we started going over, okay, what would it be like to have a renter? Do we rent furnished? Where will our son stay? When we talked with our son, he was like, he'll figure it out. And then between us and him, we said we'll work to either fly him wherever we are, or between his sister and his brother-in-law, he could stay with them. So once we got him settled, now it's okay, should we rent the house out? And after running the numbers, we decided we was going to rent the house out, but we didn't want to rent the house furnished. And we had to decide, do we keep our things? Because we had just got this house set the way we wanted it. We both had our own home offices. By this time, my husband had begun scaling back on work, and he was looking to shift and do something different also. And so he had his man living room set up. I had another living room upstairs. I had all of my plans. Everything in the house was perfect. And we had everything that we needed. We had just invested in new mattresses, sofas. We had basically refurnished the whole house, and we had remodeled the whole house. We had been kind of working on this. We're DIYers. So we were painting, and we were upgrading and adding molding here and switching out sinks and faucets and knobs and toilets. And all of those things. And we were doing that because we were preparing a house for us as empty nesters. We wanted it to be really comfortable. We had been in that house 20 years. We had raised our kids there, and we wanted to make it more personalized for us as adults. And so that's where we were. Everything was perfect. We had 2 home offices. We were thinking, okay, we'll start doing some more entrepreneur stuff. But when my husband said we should go ahead and move to Kenya, I was ready to sell all that stuff. And so when we ran the numbers between putting the stuff in storage and selling everything, if we were going to really do this and be on the road, and we say, okay, we really like what we're doing and we're traveling the next 2, 5, 10 years, it didn't make financial sense to keep paying storage. And then we also thought, okay, if we decide that we like it on the road, if everything was in storage, then we would have to come back, take every piece out, take pictures of it to get it sold. And that's a task that I just didn't want to do. And I've heard some people do that. They've actually put their stuff in storage. They traveled and they realized they're not coming back to their old home. And then now they have all this stuff in storage. I didn't want that. I said, you know what? I'm going to trust God. I believe this is what he's calling us to. I had already been dreaming about Kenya. I had already been to Kenya. My husband finally was like, yes, let's go. I said, no, I'm going to sell this stuff. And I said, if it doesn't work out or if we change our mind, then the Lord will provide for us to be able to refurnish our house if we come back to the house that we had or if we get another house. So that's how we made the decision. It was financial, but it was also logical and logistical. It's like, okay, what are we going to do with this stuff if we have to sell it later? So let's talk about how it was selling all of our belongings that we had taken decades to accumulate. So the only things that we did keep was like personal things, the kids' photos, family photos, those kinds of things. Y'all, I even sold things I had gotten as gifts for my wedding. When I tell y'all I was all in on living abroad, I was all in. And the wonderful thing about it is it felt good selling the belongings. Like when we sold our couch that we had from Rooms to Go from 20 years ago, like to a young college couple, man, I was happy. Like, just knowing it was going to them. They wanted something inexpensive they could furnish their apartment with. It was exciting. One guy, he came and brought our sofas, new sofas, reclining sofas with good seats and cup holders. He bought that for his family. So I was exchanging stories with people who were coming. I had met people who had done ministry. We met a guy who was living abroad and who actually wrote and authored a book. And he was talking about all the 20 some odd countries he had been to. I had sold my crystal cake dish to a mom who was making a wedding cake for her daughter's wedding. And she was using the cake dish that I had got for my wedding. So as I was selling these things and people were sharing their story with us, like it just seemed like it was meant to be, like it was ordained. It was divinely ordered. So it was actually a blessing to me and I think God orchestrated it like that. As I was selling the things, it's like they were going to someone else who was going to actually use it and value it, if that makes any sense. So now fast forward, we're standing in an empty 5-bedroom, 2.5 bath home. And let's talk about the way that changed how I think about money. So once we had gotten rid of everything, and we had some beautiful stuff. We had some really nice stuff, pieces that I picked out and just really made our house our own. And a lot of our stuff was newer stuff. But when I saw everything gone and I saw the balance in my account from the things that I sold, and our tickets were booked for Kenya, we had our e-visas, it felt good, actually. It felt exactly like what we were supposed to be doing. It felt exhilarating. It felt light, and it felt exciting. And so as we stood there and we walked around the empty house and we looked at each room, and you could feel the memories in your heart. But I also realized, I said, this is going to be some other family's home now. This is going to be their temporary home for 12 months if they do a 12-month lease, or 24 months, or however long they rent from us. I said, but our season in this home, we bought this home to raise our 4 children. Our grandchildren have spent time in this home. But for my husband and I, we knew that spending the next 20 years in that house probably wasn't going to be it. Now, will we go back to that home in the future? Yeah, possibly. I don't think so. I think that'll remain as a rental property, but never say never. But just knowing, it's like it was easy to let go of the things that were let go because I was so fixated on what was ahead. And so that was the blessing in selling everything we own to move abroad. If you enjoyed this video, if you are considering moving abroad, if you're considering any of the things that I talked about, make sure you hit the subscribe button because I have a lot more to share from this journey beside this. Catch you guys in the next video. Bye.